Patrick Johnston, welcome.
Right. Yes, welcome. Yes.
Here we are, Canucks this week. A lot to talk about this week. I have some things to throw at you. So we will get the niceties out of the way first. Thank you to Woody's RV, woodysrv.com, sponsor of Canucks this week. Certainly there's, lots of options for Christmas. All the way up and down the list if you want to get an RV. Thinking about myself because road trips down south once we see snow and ice on my cycle commute to work certainly make that appealing. While we're talking about things on ice though, Patrick, let's look at these Vancouver Canucks. Look, the first few months of the season, chaos, disaster, tank for Bedard, won 8 out of 11. Hottest team in the NHL. Against some really bad teams, giving up a ton of goals. We've talked in years past, it seems going back the last 4 years, how they've got some nice pieces, but it's all been papered over by the fact they're getting great goaltending. Well, they don't have great goaltending anymore. In fact, their goaltending absolutely stinks and has for most of the year. Spencer Martin's been a nice story, but you look at how they've won these games. You have to admire their resiliency, but I still don't know. Is this a good team or is this not a good team? Tell me. You're the expert.
I think on the balance of where they stand, this is not a. I say a good team is a team that's in the playoffs, and this is a team that is, as it stands, 2 points out of the second wildcard spot in the West. But let's be realistic. That's Calgary, and the Canucks have played one more game than them. And also, let's also be honest. Somehow they are tied with the Colorado Avalanche, who have 3 games in hand with the Canucks and would immediately bounce over without any doubt both the Calgary Flames and the Edmonton Oilers, who are sitting in the wildcard spots. So in the end, the Canucks are the 10th best team right now in the West. But you look at the Nashville Predators, who are sitting behind them 1 point, have 4 games in hand. Like this is a team that certainly has fun elements, as you said, but the fact remains that defense is a problem. And in a league where teams are scoring, I think, 3.2 goals per game, when you've given up 5 goals 12 times, that's just not very good. No matter what era you're in.
They've scored 13 in the last 2 games.
I know.
Who cares? They were the reincarnation of the '84 Oilers. Leave Grant Fuhrer back there, and we'll just worry about scoring goals. No, I mean, I take your point. Games in hand are always a massive problem when you look at this, and I think sometimes you can say, well, they're 2 points out. Sometimes it's the amount of teams you have to battle and climb over for those positions. However, having said that, I still don't know what this team is. Yes, they have a terrible blue line. Yes, the goaltending hasn't been good. What if Thatcher Demko comes back from his injury and can play close to the level they had before? If they are on a, winning 8 out of 11 clip through the rest of the year, presumably they'd make the playoffs, no?
Well, you have 3 teams. You have 3 options to pick from, essentially. You have the team that started 0-5-2. You have the team that has gone 12-7-1, or the team that is the exact record, 12-12-3. Which of those 3 options do you think this team is?
Well, I mean, this is what makes
That's kind of
all the. No, it is, Patrick, and I think this is what's fascinating. Out of all the years that I've been around the Canucks, both when I used to be a fan as a kid, and sleeping overnight at the Coliseum after they beat Chicago to get Stanley Cup tickets to the Islanders, from that period to covering this professionally and being in management and directing other people to cover it. I look at this, and this is one of the more perplexing Canuck teams. And again, cliche, American Thanksgiving, that's when you know what you are. I don't know what this team is and the reason I say that is if you look at that 0-5-2 start, to me, they looked good enough in those games that if they could have held a lead, like they didn't look bad in those games, like they got the lead. You go back to the first game, 3-goal lead on Edmonton, and they couldn't hang on. In Edmonton, we can take our shots, but they're a quality team. Now, then they went in that losing streak, and they just looked absolutely terrible. And now they're a team where you've got players that have seen, Bo Horvat's a magnificent story. Elias Pettersson looks like he's got the team on his back. Quinn Hughes still isn't where he was, but we still know what he can be. JT Miller, and these are all offensive storylines, but I still, you break the team up into those chunks that you talked about, and I think those chunks are so wildly different that we don't know ultimately what this team is. And I think what contributes to that dysfunction is this clown show with the general manager seeming not wanting the coach, and the coach, is he on the same page as the general manager? Is he being defiant? Like, what are they? It's just it's laughably dysfunctional. But I think that we see that play out on the ice, don't we?
I don't know. I mean, they're a 500 team right now.
Don't give me a shrug. Don't give me a shrug when they were up they were down 4-0, come back and take a 5-4 lead. They're down 6-5 and they win 7-6. That is a clown show, and it's laughably dysfunctional.
Oh, that was a clown show.
There's
no doubt about it. Oh, there's no doubt about that. It was ridiculous. I mean, it was great fun, and as I said after the game, fans will show up for this. This is great. But is it a sustainable thing? I mean, did they deserve to win in San Jose last night? No, absolutely not. The thing that saved them is that they ran into a goaltender who was having a worse night than theirs was, and who had to change goalies midstream, put in a rookie playing in his first NHL game. It's a team that. On the ice, these are a bunch of players who know one thing they can do, which is that they can make things happen offensively, and they've been playing smart offensively, and their power play is really good, but they have a lot of breakdowns defensively. Now, obviously, again, goals are up across the league, so it's not like saying, "Oh my goodness, they're the worst defenders in the league," means quite the same thing, because everybody's defending badly, if you know what I mean. But in the end, in relative terms, there's just no way, when you look at the fact that this is the team that has given up. I have to open it up again to remind myself just how many they've given up. 106 goals, Paul, right? They're third worst in the league. The only two teams who have done worse than them are San Jose and Anaheim, and neither of those teams have double digits wins. There's one team that's given up fewer goals than them, the Columbus Blue Jackets, who only have 8 wins. Every other team that is in this range is a team that is not in the playoff conversation. Now, this is
so if in the past, I would always be accused of being the glass half empty guy, but I will counter your glass, your empty glass. Speaking of which, looking forward to seeing you at the Province Cheesies, our version of the Christmas party tomorrow night. Speaking of empty glasses. But the Canucks are 6th in the league in goals for.
Yeah, sure. But
so why can't they sustain that for the rest of the year?
I mean, they could, maybe. I mean, I just, it's one of those ones where it's like there are things that are easier to predict, which is that your goaltending will continue to be not good, or your defense will not continue to be not good enough. And there's things that are less easy to predict, is that your team will continue to score at the rate that it's scored at. The Canucks have they are scoring at a much above average rate. Everybody's scoring above average, but they are much above average, and that's the thing to be skeptical about. Now, they have, obviously, like you said, Elias Pettersson's having an unbelievable season. He's having his best ever season. He's having the season that people expected he would have, and that's making a huge difference. Bo Horvat, again, has just gotten better and better and better, and is putting himself in an incredible position to get his next contract. Like that, those are great things, and I think this is, to me, what is the thing that should be disappointing in all this, is that those two guys should be driving the bus, and instead, all they're having to do, they're bailing water out. Like, look at the rate they're bailing water out. Like that's
this is what's so fantastic about this season. When I talk about sleeping overnight in 82, like this is why this season stands out to me, because this is yet another head scratcher. They cannot afford Bo Horvat. They just can't. Like, if you look at where this team is now with him there and what he's going to be, you're right. Like, it's a fantastic story, but you have to get rid of him. Like, if you can't pay him, you have to trade him and sell high. Now, if the team's still flirting with that last playoff spot, 2 points out, come trade deadline, what message does that send to your fans? Like, this season is, to me, it's unparalleled. And you talk the roller coaster that has been the Vancouver Canucks. I just think this confluence of circumstances this year make it fascinating. It's like must-watch television. It's must-read stories from you and Ben, amongst others. I can't predict game to game. I can't predict period to period what this team is going to be, and I certainly can't predict next year what the direction is.
It's interesting you mentioned Horvat, and we think a lot about the trades and where he's at. And the name that was thrown out there today is apparently there's a team out there that considers him like a younger Ryan O'Reilly, which is high praise. I'm not sure Horvat is quite the two-way presence that O'Reilly is, but Horvat's obviously immense skill on face-offs, which has can have great influence on special teams, as well as his ability to score goals right now, and his offensive talents have put him in that kind of conversation, at least in the short term. And you look back at O'Reilly and the story with him in Colorado, and the fact that he is one of the guys that Colorado said, you know what, this isn't working. They thought they built a group that was going to go somewhere. It didn't go somewhere, and they blew it up. And they recentered themselves around Nathan MacKinnon and Gabe Landeskog, and that's where they went. And in many ways, that should be the Horvat story there, is that the Canucks have an opportunity here to get a haul for a player that, they would love to keep, but they can't think about him anymore. They need to think about how they're going to buttress up the current squad, if at all. If there's any way to buttress it up in the next couple of years to make it something sustainable, something that's truly a contender, that's more efficient, even if they still have some inefficient contracts on the books, Horvat's got to be the guy. And it's certainly, the noise that you're hearing, it's very obvious what's going on, is that his camp is trying to make things loud and clear to ownership, to management, where Horvat's interests lie, that they want the contract, they believe there's a contract there, and that in the end, if they can't satisfy, the Canucks are just going to have to make the decision. And the Canucks should smartly do that. They're never going to have more value than they will right now in Bo Horvat.
That's it, people. And the other name that's been out there is Brock Boeser, and you're selling incredibly low on him right now, whereas you have a guy that you're selling incredibly high on, and historically the Canucks have done the flip-flop on that. So the other thing I do want to ask you about is when we talk about this team and the dysfunction and really not knowing what you're getting, how much of that is down to the NHL as well being a little more stratified this year, where there are teams that just aren't good, and then you have teams that are very good. And we've even seen that in the last week. The Canucks did get some surprising results on their road trip. But then they come home and they look terrible against a couple of good teams. And then, hey, look, they've won 3 in a row, all in overtime, all against what are generally considered to be bad teams. So when I look at their next stretch, Minnesota, Calgary, Winnipeg, St. Louis, Seattle, different story. Now, then we're getting into in and around the Christmas break, but then you're into Edmonton, and then you got San Jose, Winnipeg, Calgary. It's not quite a murderer's row. But is this really what we see with the Canucks? We're going to see them, if the schedule just happens to string together three games against bad teams, well, they're going to look great. And then you're going to play top echelon teams and you look bad.
Yeah, I mean, the Wild are tough. The Flames are supposed to be tough, but who knows what's going to happen with them. The Jets aren't great, but they've been having an interesting year, I guess. The Blues have been disappointing. You do have a 5-game, 6 games, and the Oilers, who knows, right now, given their goaltending, what they're going to be like. But, you have a 6-game stretch here running into Christmas where, sure, the Canucks come out of that 4-2. They're 2 games over 500 going into Christmas, which is, not, it's a nice, decent record. It's certainly ahead of where they were going into Thanksgiving. And, there is momentum in that. But like you said, you come out of that, you have you have a pretty tricky schedule once the New Year comes around. You do have the Jets and the Flames again before in the Sharks, 3 games right after Christmas, and then you come home, you play the Islanders, you play the Avalanche, and then they're on this very tricky road trip that goes to Winnipeg, Pittsburgh, Tampa, Florida, and Carolina. Right, and especially those last 3 games, but even that Pittsburgh game, you throw that in, that is a hard road trip, and obviously I think the thing that's tricky about it is that it is almost that extra stop in Winnipeg, because usually when you fly east, you get an extra day, so you travel and then you sort of have a day to settle yourselves. And here, what they're doing is they fly to Winnipeg. Right, they actually have an extra day off before Winnipeg. They fly to Winnipeg, they play in Winnipeg, then they get up, they go to Pittsburgh, they get up, they go to Tampa, they get up, they go to Panthers, and then the next day they're in Carolina. It's a very busy stretch, And that there, all of a sudden, you're going to be almost at the All-Star break. You're roughly halfway through your season by that point. And if you're still sitting at roughly 500, I mean, you still have a lot of work to do. You're going to have to go on a run like you did last season and play at a higher pace than you've been playing at. Credit to the Canucks, they pulled out some wins, but the reality is in the end, if you're winning games, you're winning games in overtime as often as you are against the opponents you are. Like against San Jose, they had 18 high danger chances against, which was the second most of the season. San Jose, who aren't very good, were getting control on the inside, and that was a bad sign. And it's like I've noted more than once. 2 weeks ago in Colorado, they did a great job controlling their own end. In Vegas, they did a good job. The week before that, a really good job against LA. They've had three recent examples of that, but mostly in the end, the cases have been they've given up too much defensively. They've had struggle controlling the middle of the ice, and that's going to be the problem in the end. That if they aren't going to score 5 goals every night or 6 goals every night, Paul, they're going to score 3 goals every night, and that's just not going to get you wins when you're giving up 5 goals 12 out of 27 games.
I mean, I know, but it's still fascinating to watch. Yeah. It really is like car crash hockey. No, so and we've suffered through some very boring hockey the last 8 years or so. So you're right. I mean, it's at least fascinating. I didn't watch the first period of the Montreal game, but I mentioned to my family, it's like, Canucks are down 4-0 at the end of the first period, and everyone laughs. And the next day, my wife says, so what was the final score in the Canucks game? I'm like, they won 76. She's like, 7-6 rather. She's like looking at me like, what? So there's that disbelief factor to it. But I'm going to ask you something that I know you can't answer, which is probably dumb, but makes for good conversation. I say you can't answer because no one can truly get in the head of ownership, which is, I think, where like we can talk about GMs, we can talk about coach. And I saw Ed Willis post this earlier, like you can fire the coach, you can trade whoever you want, but this is an ownership situation. And it really is. It's never been more stark than this year. When you look at this team and you look at Brock Boeser and Bo Horvat, pieces that you could use to really do a proper, like, no, we can start a process here to keep Hughes and Pettersson and look that we're truly going to compete for Stanley Cup. Or you're like, we're in that last playoff spot. All we need to do is get in. Demko plays better. And we know this isn't Jim Rutherford's call. No matter what they tell us, we know that ownership in the past, their legacy has been that they get involved in these decisions. We want playoff revenue. Let's do it. Let's just get it. What's your sense on what this team is going to do? Because let's just they kick around. They're in this up 1 week, down the next, and they stay within striking distance of that last playoff spot. What's your sense of what they're going to do at the trade deadline with those pieces?
Well, I mean, what has history told us? They want to chase the playoff game.
Right.
I think it's pretty simple, and that's I mean, in the end, ownership sets out the standard. This is what they want. Right, this is what we believe is their deliver, and that's how the team's been operated. And other than a short blip, which even then, I mean, even if you go back to say hiring Mike Gillis, that he was brought in to do things differently, and sort of sold an idea of this is how you can be a notable top team in the league, and we're going to do it, and they did it, and that was the process. But then once things changed and they said, okay, we need to change course. No, we're going to continue chasing. They kept chasing, and look where we've been. I mean, that's the thing. They switched Trevor Linden and Jim Benning because they said, we think we can do this, we think we can do this. They moved on from Trevor Linden because they said, actually, well, no. And then in the end, they just, couldn't deliver with Jim Benning, and there were crowds booing. In the end, and there was sort of concern for the viability of the brand and being able to generate revenue, and they moved on. They made a change a year ago, and now we are a year later, and we're having basically the same discussions we always have, because in the end, the answer is forever there, that the priority is to see if they can squeak in and get a couple of playoff dates, and that's kind of it. And
change the GM, change the coach, change the players, and less ownership either changes the way they think or backs off. We're stuck in the metaphor of me trying to ride my bike to work in a compacted ice bike lane, riding on ice. So, all right. Well, I was going to get into some fun stuff around. Oh, I know. You'll believe me. It was. Anyone wants to just stand on 10th and have a good laugh next time it snows, just go and do it. Because it was quite an image. Anyway, I was going to get into some fun stuff around the jersey retirement, which we didn't get to do last week, or the 94 team, but we've run long here. So next week, as we look towards take more of a bigger picture in the year, and we'll have some fun stuff planned. So we'll do that. woodiesrv.com. I will mention that road report. I want to get your opinion here. I'm going to ask you first about how many games they're going to win in the next week. This is actually a pretty easy week for the Canucks. They've only got, between the time we're doing this and when we do one next week, there's only 2 games. There's Minnesota and Calgary. So first, I want you to answer Minnesota and Calgary, how many of those games the Canucks are going to win. And then beyond that, because we talk about the woodiesrv.com road report, Calgary and Edmonton are their next 2 road games, separated by 3 home games in there. But which of those 2 cities would you rather visit?
Well, I'm going to go boring and say they're going to win one of their next 2 games. They'll fluke into one. I mean, maybe they'll. I don't know. Maybe they'll fluke. I mean, they're due. Given how things have gone, they're due to lose both. But given how things have also gone, they're going to win one, I guess is what I'm saying. And of the 2 road cities to visit,
where would you rather go? Calgary.
I'd rather go to Calgary.
I knew you'd say that. Why?
Well, first of all, you can see the mountains, which is lovely. That was just a nice thing in Denver 2 weeks ago. You know, you stand there and you just look up, and there's the mountains. They look fabulous. So the view is great.
We have mountains here, Patrick.
I know, but you're asking me about road cities. I'm just it feels familiar, I guess is what I'm saying. I don't have any particular places that stand out in Calgary that I've been to that I absolutely have to go see, but there's nowhere else in Edmonton.
Not a big Cowboys guy?
Not a big Cowboys guy.
Not in the winter?
And not in the winter anyway. My cousin lives in Calgary, so I can see him.
Fair enough. I just know we have a former colleague who's very attached to Edmonton, who famously, when I made my first trip to Edmonton to cover a Lions Eskimos game, and it was probably 96 or 97, and I was told, oh my God, you're going to love it in Edmonton. The restaurants there are so good because, Vancouver has such crappy restaurants.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, especially where you live.
Yeah.
No options. Yeah, no, Calgary, I mean, I had a buddy that lived in Edmonton for a long time, and he doesn't live there anymore. So, I don't even have anyone to say hello to.
All right. We'll leave it there. Thank you, Patrick. We'll look forward to whatever this team has in store for us. You say they're going to win 1 game and 1 game only in the next week. They only play 2. So, and then we'll set up the somewhat busy Christmas period and get into some fun stuff next week.
All right.
So thanks to woodiesrv.com. Thank you, Patrick. Hope your kids feel better. Hope you feel better. And hope all our viewers, listeners, readers feel better. Sign up for our Canuck Report. You get all Patrick and Ben and various other things delivered to you in your email inbox every week. Go to theprovince.com and sign up there. Have a good week, everyone.